How do I do this again? Check, check. Started off with a bang. Come on. Okay, I'm not looking at the right spot. What's going on, folks? This ain't working. This is beginning to really irritate me. Let's try again. Greetings, fellow bike adventurers. Happy New Year. I hope your year has already started off with a bang. This video is going to answer a frequently asked question about how I plan for bike tours. And as usual, I'm going to try to keep this simple because, well, I really do try to keep things simple in real life. I generally plan in 5 steps, the first of which is how to find a route. And for that, it's not really a mystery because I do what you're doing right now. I watch YouTube. I'd be willing to bet that at least 80% of my trips are based off of what I see on YouTube from many different bike channels that I subscribe to. Now, of course, the problem is that I want to ride every trail I watch, so sometimes it's hard to choose just one. But again, that's where I start. So secondly, I try to scout out the route, where it is, how long it is, what the trail conditions are, general high-level information. So again, YouTube videos are fantastic to answer these questions, and I'm really amazed at how friendly YouTubers are to provide feedback and advice. For more established routes, there's often significant online information with dedicated websites or Facebook pages. Yes, I turn to Google to search bike route suggestions, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. A few times the paths have been non-existent, but that's a whole nother story. The Adventure Cycling Association has excellent information, including an app that you can use en route to see weather conditions, food stops, campgrounds, and other information. Third is when I actually plan the route. And this is where I think you need to ask yourself a really important question. What kind of adventure do you want to have? After all, it's your adventure, so you make it what you want. What kind of mileage do you want to do? How many days do you have to ride? So, does the resulting daily mileage work for you? Do you want to camp? Do you want to stay indoors? Answering those questions up front makes a huge difference in how you start mapping out your journey. So let's say you've got a route picked and a range of dates that work for you, and you want to start plotting out your trip. Some websites can help you plot out the daily mileage, and you'll adjust based on where towns fall on the map. Obviously, some days might be longer, some days might be shorter, depending on the distances between locations. But when I come to making actual reservations, I try to start with the biggest constraints first and then work backward from there. A good example of this is Amtrak. Bike space is limited, so you're going to want to book those dates first. I learned the hard way on several occasions where I booked all the campgrounds and hotels only to find out that Amtrak was sold out. No! And I had to rebook everything or just resort to a different means of transportation. In one case was much more expensive. Another practical suggestion is that normally the first day of the tour is always easier. You're full of adrenaline, you're just happy to be out on your bike. But for me, day 2 or 3 is usually the toughest as my body is trying to adjust to longer rides. So I intentionally cut myself some slack on those days, and I resort to slightly shorter distances and then make up the difference on the remaining days. Another tip is just to do all of your lodging reservations in one sitting and then adjust along the way. If one town is full, you can't find reservations, then you're going to need to move to the next, which means you might shift the next day also. I find it really confusing to stop midstream and try to remember where I was on the map. There are excellent camping apps like HipCamp, Outbound, Campendium, iOverlander, and the Campers app, just to name a few. For indoor options, I've grown accustomed to 2 primary sources, and that's Hotels.com and Airbnb. For both, I especially like being able to see reviews, and while I'm usually looking for inexpensive options, I also try to find the highest rating at the same time. And yes, that does exist. If the rates seem high, often I'll call the location directly and see how they respond. I've never had a motel prefer to have me book through Hotels.com, but sometimes the rate is less, so it's worth a check. One pro tip, if I'm stuck and I can't find anything available in a town, I will still call places on the list because number one, often they have space, but they only allot certain rooms to apps like Hotel.com. And number two, unlike the bigger chains that can't be bothered, smaller motels or hotels are usually very happy to make other suggestions in the area, so it can be a really valuable phone call. I find planning details are usually complicated with a lot of notes and numbers, and since that's not really my strong suit, I usually keep a spreadsheet with links, reservation confirmations, mileage, phone numbers, all that information so that I can print it up on one page and take it with me. And yes, I also keep a digital copy on my phone just in case. Okay, the fourth step I take is to understand the history of the route. I mean, you already know this if you've watched my videos, but I like to explore the historical significance of the area. And people always ask me, where do I get my facts and famous people? And there's no magic there. I turn to Google or Wikipedia and occasionally to ChatGPT, and I enter simple searches like history of insert the town or area or the trail, or famous people from the town or area, or top 10 fun facts about the area. And yeah, beware, there's a lot of nonsense also floating around, like John Denver spending his childhood in Cumberland, Maryland. Thanks, ChatGPT. Also, I look in Amazon or the Apple bookstore for titles like History of a particular area. I especially like historical fiction. One great example was reading The Yearling while I was riding the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. I mean, sure, it's a kid's book, but A, that's my reading level, and B, it just made the area come to life when I could see what I was reading about. It's just kind of magical. Anyway, with all of that info, like any good fifth grader, by the way, thanks, Mrs. Stiles. And look at that little thug in that photo. I pull together a simple book report in a document and I bring it along with me for the trip, whether digitally or even just old school printing it up. I like to review that stuff as I'm making my way along the route. Often it spurs me to share these facts while I'm riding, much to your enjoyment, I'm sure. I should add that I am a total sucker for those plaques along routes too. I enjoy stopping and reading what's up, and for practical sake, I try to take a photo of those signs for future reference if I want to add something in a video, or maybe just to take note if I return to the area in the future. I know it may seem silly to some, but I really enjoy knowing what happened on the ground under my tires. It just adds so much to the overall experience to know about events that shape the landscape around me. Sometimes you can almost feel the significance of certain spots, so I'd encourage you to take the time for a little reading and research. The final stage is riding the route. Yes, planning continues far into the actual ride. And here's the key. You have to plan to adjust your plan. Eisenhower once said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." Detours are inevitable. That restaurant you hope to eat at might be closed. The most scenic route has a bypass. You get a serious maintenance problem and you need to stop in an unplanned town. That quaint little hotel turns out to be a dive, or your plans are going to change. But then again, that little dive turns out to be a gem, or that waitress at the diner has a tip on sightseeing that only a local would know about, and it takes you off of your planned route. You have to be flexible and ready for alternatives. You just can't plan for everything, and at a certain point, you just have to go and enjoy what happens. But that's the thrilling part of any adventure. It wouldn't be much fun if everything was totally certain and mapped out, in my humble opinion. I hope those steps were helpful. If you've got other thoughts, leave them below in the comments. And if you like this video, give me a little thumbs up and maybe even subscribe because, well, it massages my massive ego. Thanks for watching. Take care, folks. All right, that was interesting.